Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2026 Senate elections, and I'll be providing you all a quick update on what I am looking at for the Battleground map as of right now. Again, it's April 11th of 2025, so we still have a ways to go until we are really in the swing of election season, until we really know which races are shaping up to be competitive and which ones are shaping to be snooze fests. But at this point in time, we do have some important information about people who are running, who's not running, and who's leaning either way. So I'm going to begin by filling out the states that we kind of know are going to be voting for one party. And this isn't going to be an official Senate prediction because I'm not going to do that just yet. But I will kind of make a battleground map here, which is what obviously the title of the video is going to reflect. So I'm going to talk about races that I think are going to be worth watching based on what we know at this point in time. So, as you can see, I've already given the Republicans 46 seats, and I'm going to give them a few more here. Democrats at 42. I think the next rational step to fill out would be states like Minnesota, states like Virginia, which are kind of in the likely Democratic category. For the Republicans, it seems at this point that Ohio could fall into that category, as well as Iowa. In Ohio, we haven't really seen any sign of Sherrod Brown running. Initially, I thought he might have actually been looking towards running. But it may be more likely he runs for governor or is truly retired from the political scene for a while. Now, Kansas, I think, is also going to be in the likely column. Laura Kelly said she's not going to run for this seat, and I don't think she would have won, but she would have had the chance to reduce the margin. So Republicans are sitting pretty at 49, but they did get some bad news in New Hampshire, where Chris Sununu a few days ago did announce that he would not run for Senate, and he kind of does this song and dance almost every cycle. Not really in 2024 because there was not a Senate race there, but in 2022 especially, a lot of Republicans thought Sununu was going to run. I myself thought he was going to run because at the time, a lot of people thought 2022 was shaping up to be a red wave. Sununu was popular. In 2020, he won his biggest victory, I think, ever in his gubernatorial elections, and he declined to run against Mackie Hassan, who is seen as a good incumbent, but certainly beatable. She only won by, I think, 1,000 or 2,000 votes in 2016. So fast forward, as you all know, the story ended with Hassan winning re-election decisively, around 9% against a candidate, Don Bolduc, who is not particularly strong. And so at the end of the day, what's interesting to me is that Sununu has had a few chances to maybe throw his hat in the ring, and he hasn't really taken the bait either time. So that's bad news for Republicans, who Sununu is their best candidate in this state by far at the moment, and it does not look like he is going to run for Senate anytime soon, especially 2026 is going to be an open seat. Democrats likely to run Chris Pappas here, who is a good candidate, but if there was ever a chance for Sununu to come in and run, just given the fundamentals of the race, national environment aside, this could have been the year, but he passed on that opportunity. So the flip side for Democrats is that they did get some rather ominous news in North Carolina. I don't have any inside information that would concern this, so I'm just speculating. But Wiley Nickel, who was the former representative for the 13th District for 2 years, announced he is running for Senate. Now, what's interesting is that Wiley Nickel, while not a bad candidate, him running, I think, could be seen as a sign that Roy Cooper, who is the governor of North Carolina, the popular Democratic candidate, or the candidate who's most popular among Democrats to run and potentially flip the seat, that might be seen as a sign as him not running. Now, initially in 2024, there was some speculation that Cooper was running for Senate, again, because he actually passed up on the VP nomination for Kamala Harris. There were whispers that, look, he's going to run for Senate in 2026. This could be worth it in the long run. Now, we don't know for sure if he's ruled it out yet. I would have no way of predicting or knowing what Cooper's thinking right now. But the fact that Wiley Nickel, who I'd imagine is a pretty well-connected Democratic politician within the state, the fact that he is running for this seat suggests that maybe Roy Cooper is leaning against running, and the field is open for anyone to run. So that's going to be very interesting, and we are certainly going to have to see how this all pans out. Now, I want to move on to Georgia. This is, I think, the race that is potentially most, aside from New Hampshire, potentially most dependent on recruitment. Republicans, if they get Brian Kemp, think they have a good chance of knocking out Jon Ossoff, who is the incumbent Democratic senator here. And a lot of people think that if Kemp is the nominee, the race is already in the lean Republican column. I'm not sure if I'd put it there, but certainly there's an argument to be made. Kemp won by 8% in 2022, and he's been a relatively well-liked figure in Georgia since he's been governor, going back to 2019. Now, what's interesting is that Kemp has been radio silent from what I have heard. We have yet to really get any information or sign for him that he's preparing to run. There have been some rumors, very small rumors that aren't confirmed or anything, that he might be leaning against running. And that is kind of what we are hearing. I think he and Cooper might be in similar situations where maybe neither of them want to run. And the broad trend has been that governors like local politics. They like being able to get stuff done from their governor's mansion. They don't like the gridlock and the divisiveness of Washington. At least that's what a lot of governors have said or have kind of speculated, or have kind of, I would say implied, not speculated. Now, what's interesting is that there has been a pattern of some governors running, but they don't really do particularly well. Now, obviously, Maryland's a deep blue state, and I don't think a lot of people expected Larry Hogan to win, but he still lost by 12% in that race. A little more than that, actually. We saw in Tennessee in 2018, Phil Bredesen ran. He was a governor who won every county back in his day. He lost by 11% to Marsha Blackburn, and that was in a blue wave midterm, mind you. It was the best possible conditions for him, and he still lost decisively. Montana is the best example of this. A lot of people thought Steve Bullock was going to win even on election day, and he lost by 10% to Steve Daines. It has been rough for governors in these Senate elections. And by the way, Bullock, I don't even think he wanted to run for that Senate seat. I think he was convinced by Chuck Schumer. If you go back to 2020, Bullock didn't jump in that race until March, until I think a few days before the primary, the primary, not the primary itself, but the primary filing deadline. So governors have had a recent trend of staying away from the Senate, and Republicans really hope that's not the case in Georgia. Democrats, North Carolina also hope that's not the case. But either way, I want to give you guys updates on these races because they are so interesting. I think if Roy Cooper runs in North Carolina, we could see the chances of Democrats winning there go up significantly. Same with Brian Kemp with Republicans in Georgia. Now, the final race I want to talk about are Alaska, Texas, Michigan, and Maine. Let's start by checking in on Alaska. Democrats have not fielded a candidate yet. Mary Peltola is reportedly likely to run for governor, but not Senate, so I think this race is going to be in the GOP column for now. Texas is another one. Ken Paxton looks likely to run a primary challenge against John Cornyn, who is the incumbent GOP senator. Cornyn has been an overperformer for the majority of his career. He's been doing well in these elections for a while. In 2020, he outran Trump by, I think, 5 or 6%, or I think 4 or 5%. So he is a good candidate, and Republicans know that. But Ken Paxton seems at this point likely to run. Paxton, I don't think, would be favored to lose by any means, but he is kind of the weakest and most right-wing, I would say, electorally, of the Republican bench in Texas. So him running could make it interesting, but Democrats had a very bad November in Texas last year. I think it surpassed, really even their worst expectations. So that really, I think, would bring that to a halt. Now, had Harris only lost Texas by 5 or 6 like Biden did, the conversation would be very different. But because Harris performed so poorly in Texas and because Democrats have no, real, I'd say, sense of momentum here, this race, even if Paxton is the GOP nominee, is off the board, but would likely be a bit smaller in margin and could come back onto the board if things get interesting, if something changes. So what does that mean? I think the battleground map is kind of restricted to these 4 states in the East Coast. Michigan and Maine are the last 2 ones we're going to have to check up on. Let's start in Michigan, where Mallory McMorrow, as well as likely Haley Stevens, are likely to run. Just to give you all some updates on who these people are, Mallory McMorrow is a Democratic state senator. She, of course, is from a semi-competitive district. She has a good electoral record, but the drawback to her is that she is only a state senator. She does not have a lot of recognition within the state as a whole, and she doesn't have any experience running a statewide campaign. And when you have a Senate race in a key swing state like Michigan, you generally want to run people who are maybe the Attorney General, maybe the Secretary of State, maybe at least a member of the House of Representatives like Alissa Slotkin was, or in a best-case scenario, you run the governor who is ideally popular. And that's, again, what Republicans are hoping for in Georgia and what the Democrats are hoping for in North Carolina. Now, what is especially interesting to me is the Democrats are also likely going to see Haley Stevens jump into the field. Haley Stevens is representative from suburban Detroit. She flipped a seat to the Democrats in 2018. What's interesting about her is that she's a more moderate Democrat. She doesn't have, I think, the same ties to a lot of, maybe labor unions and, kind of the ancestral, the more populist tradition to be associated with the Democratic Party. She is a more moderate suburban Democrat. Who I think would do well in the Detroit suburbs, but could be a problem in rural Michigan, could be a problem in the working class cities where Democrats really did not do well in 2024. So I think that McMorrow would be a bit stronger than Stevens if I'm a Democrat. I would also say that neither of these candidates are, I think, ideal. A lot of Democrats like Mallory McMorrow, but the interesting thing about her is that, again, like I said, she's not a statewide official. Ideally, Democrats would run someone like Dana Nessel, potentially, maybe even Jocelyn Benson, but she's likely to run. I think she actually is going to run for governor. Garland Gilchrist, who's the lieutenant governor of Michigan, he's also going to run for governor. So Democrats have two good candidates, I think, in that governor's race, but they don't have one statewide good candidate in the Senate race. Something to think about. Now, Maine is the last one. Maine's going to be tricky, and it's going to be tricky, I think, until Election Day 2026. Susan Collins is the GOP incumbent. She will win that primary, likely comfortably. And even though her approval ratings are bad, they were bad in 2020, and she still won by 9%. So it's kind of hard to get a gauge of what's going on up in Maine. Very enigmatic state, I would say, electorally. But Democrats don't really have a clear candidate here. Troy Jackson, who's the president of the Senate, is actually likely to run for governor. So Democratic, I think the party's kind of left with three options. They can either run someone who's relatively unknown, which is not ideal, but has been done before, or they can run either Shelley Pingree or Janet Mills. Shelley Pingree, interestingly, is the representative from the 1st District of Maine. She's around 70 years old, so she is on the older side, but so is Janet Mills. And interestingly, or I think it might actually be Mills that's 70, but both Pingree and Mills are on the older side, so they wouldn't, I don't think, would be serving for more than 2 terms in the Senate. But Pingree is from the coastal 1st District down here, so she, I think, could have a good base of support to run against Collins with. But Janet Mills is a statewide official who has won 2 statewide gubernatorial elections. That being said, Democrats have got no indication from either of those candidates that they're running, so Susan Collins might get a weaker opponent this time, which could be detrimental to Democratic chances both in 2026 and 2028 of getting back a majority in the Senate. So the battleground map for now, the Republicans are still in the clear here, in my opinion. Of course, things could change. Generally speaking, the waves tend to not start building up until the year of. Just ask the Republicans in 2010. But at the same time, things can also get worse for maybe not worse for Democrats, but things can always not be great for Democrats. They could always have their own 2022. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It'll be interesting to watch these races unfold. But for now, my battleground map is still pretty small. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you all in the next video.